Good evening. Welcome to the Township Board of Trustees meeting for Thursday, February 13th. Mr. Massey, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now I'll ask, as we call the meeting to order, for approval of the consent agenda and the regular agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we will move to public comment, and I'm going to ask, I know we've gotten away from this a little bit, but I'd like to limit it to 3 minutes per individual if we could, so or close to that. So we'll start on the right side of the room. If anybody cares to comment?
Sure, I will.
Mr. Anderson?
Larry Anderson, 6545 Kings Point Road. First thing I wanted to do was discuss a little bit with the water thing with Del Webb or Grand Reserve Subdivision and allowing them to disconnect and how it would affect rates of the residents. The water system costs X number of dollars per year to maintain. That cost is not going to change if they disconnect. We're still going to have that same price to maintain. If it's $100,000 to maintain it and you got 1,000 residents attached into it, you pay $100 a month. But if you got 2,000 residents on that same system, we're paying $50 a month. So allowing residents or condos, so commercial users to disconnect will affect everybody else's rates, and that will continue on if others decide to follow suit. The next thing I wanted to comment on was an action taken by the board at the December 10th Township Board meeting. At that meeting, at the very last minute during the meeting, a motion was made, added to the agenda to pay the board members a $4,000 stipend payment. The question was asked to that motion maker, is this for anticipated future duties? And the motion maker immediately replied, it's for both, past and future. He used the word both. There was some discussion. There were other trustees who made comments about all the additional work they had put into this Parks and Rec committee, all the additional Saturday meetings they had done, excuse me. And it was briefly mentioned by one trustee that the statute says future, but no alterations to the motion were requested or made on that. There were some alterations about stipend or in lieu of payments for the full-time employees for insurance, but nothing about that. So what brings up my comment is, in the MTA book, additional responsibilities. In addition to the statutory duties and responsibilities, Township Board members are frequently delegated additional functions and duties, Parks and Rec Commission, for the Township Board. Township Board members may be paid extra compensation for non-statutory duties, provided that sum is established before the duty is performed. And it goes on further in the book, it actually mentions this 3 times. It says trustees are frequently given additional duties and responsibilities by the Township Board action. They're not required to accept such responsibilities, but where possible, they should be willing to do so for the best interest of the township. This may be compensated as for this pending the compensation is determined prior to engaging in the activities.
You have 30 seconds, Mr. Anderson.
Okay. I am not a lawyer. I don't want to say that this is for sure, but the way I read this in 3 different sections of the books, this Township Board may have violated the state constitution by voting themselves a raise for 2019 work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Anybody else on the right side of the room care to comment? Anybody on the right side? How about on the left side? Sounds like somebody's trying to call in. Okay. Ms. Nag? Good evening.
Good evening. Let me just pass these out real quick. I don't know when your timer starts.
I'll wait till you get up there to speak.
My hands are so cold.
She's
Here.
Why don't you just pass them on down for you? How's that?
I know. Besides, you're representing one of our our historic commissions. So.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Virginia Nag. I live at 3305 East Hill Road, Grand Blanc, Michigan, in the township, and I'm here tonight as a a member and a representative of the Grand Blanc Historic District Commission, and what I have passed out for you to look at is an overview, I guess you would call it an annual report of what we have been doing as a commission and at the Perry House. I'm not going to go over it word by word, but I wanted to point out some notable things. If you look at the department activities, we had 11 meetings with 42 different agenda items, 5 action items. We did get the historic marker placed, standing out in front of the house now. Finished the kitchen remodeling. There was an Eagle Scout project, doing some clearing work on the trails, I believe, and also that Eagle Scout made some benches that people can sit in along the way, along the trails and on the property. We do have a donation policy that was adopted. People are occasionally asking if we would like a donation of, for example, a piece of furniture, to just take them without acknowledging who they came from and when. We have fun. Let me just interject here. I'm also a member of the Grand Blanc Heritage Museum, and we have a very firm policy of documenting all of our donations, because every once in a while, maybe in the next generation, somebody comes around and says, hey, you know, my grandpa donated thus and such, and we didn't really want to give it away. So we figured that for the things that have been offered and that we have accepted, we need to utilize a donation policy. Now, signage. We have been in contact with the Genesee County Road Commission to ask if we could get a sign, actually 2 signs on Perry Road similar to the ones that bring attention to the entrance of Bicentennial Park. We would like to have those for the Perry House because there really is nothing there that identifies the driveway. There's no mailbox, there's no address, and we want people to know where the building is and where the driveway is, be aware that there's a driveway there. We've had 2 open houses, homecoming parade, dedication of the Eagle project, which was mentioned previously, historic marker, remodeling finished. We've had a number of field trips from local schools, elementary schools, out to the Perry House, primarily to talk to Mr. Don Simons about archaeology and about the history of that property and what life was like back then. But we've had over 300 students out there who have very much enjoyed learning about the past. We now have a budget. We had our first budget in 2019, which totaled $10,000, and that helped us finish the remodeling and the upgrade of the kitchen. So far, as far as I'm aware, and our meeting is next Monday, our next meeting of the commission, another $10,000 has been approved for 2020. So apparently some of that money has to be allocated for utilities, but we do have a list of other projects, and I just would very quickly like to mention what they are. These are from our last Historic District Commission meeting. We need to finish painting the kitchen. We need baseboards in the sunroom where some of the historic photographs are. We gotta do something about parking. Perhaps getting some kind of aggregate to put down so cars can park safely. There isn't really much of a parking area there. We have to make a decision about the barn, and one of our new members has suggested that she would like to do what she's calling a ghost walk. She's been involved in cleaning headstones in cemeteries, and she's related to the Gibson family, who are buried in the little cemetery on the south side of Hill Road. She needs reenactors who will take on the character of some of these deceased pioneers. We would have a walk through the cemetery, and as people walk through, they would meet some of our ancestors. appearing in the cemetery in the daylight. We're not going to do that at dark. I've already talked about it. You know, having it at night. We went, oh, gee, but you don't want that kind of thing going on in the cemetery at night. Calendar. We have a calendar for 2021. We didn't get one for 2020. The picture boards and the history boards that we have in the house, telling about the history of the family and some of the pictures and documenting some of the projects that we've done and where the funding came from. We need to update those. We want to get signage for the walking trails out there, because I don't think that there are very many people who realize that those trails are there. They're mowed, they're for people to use. Then you have the year-end report. That was one of the things we talked about and got it done. Then another thing that we touched on at the last meeting is the possibility of partnering with Formar to collaborate on some natural history type programs at the Perry House. And we have a wonderful facility. We have trails. And I know that Formar has some traveling exhibits that they do around the township. So one of our commissioners who goes out there frequently is going to contact them, and maybe we can get something going between the county and our own Parks and Recreation entity. And not just at the Perry House. I would love to see that happen across the board in the township. So.
Ms. Nag, do you know if you've done anything with regard to the directions online to Perry House? It was brought to my attention that, you know, when you Google the Perry House, it takes you to a different location. Do you know if anybody's looked into that?
You know what? I totally have not looked at that because,
Okay.
of course, I know exactly where it is. But I will, I will look into that, because I know that there has been some confusion. There are now 2 Perry houses on Perry Road that have historic markers, and I can see how people would get confused. And the other problem with the historic Perry House that I'm connected with is there's really no address marker at that building, and we need to have something there close to the road, I would hope. One of the problems with the house is it sits so high up on the hill.
Right.
You could put a number on the house and who would ever see it?
Yeah.
So, but we have to work closely with the township and the county, because you don't want to put something where it's not supposed to be. And I know they have a lot of rules and regulations about that. So, I've used up my time, but I just want to tell you, Genesee County Road Commission came and talked to my family at our home. When you're driving down Hill Road between Center Road and Saginaw, take one last longing look at the trees, because they're all going to be cut down, starting as early as next week. Because we've got to have a left turn lane in there. I understand it's absolutely necessary. We've been rear-ended trying to turn into our own driveway, but it is absolutely heartbreaking to me that those trees have to come down, but you can't put a lane in if there's no place to put it. So when you're driving down that stretch of road, take one last look.
Thank you, Ms. Nag, for all your work, and we're proud of the work that you and the Historic Commission do for our township. It looks, you know, the report, we'll figure out a way to get it out to the public, but it is very impressive.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We want to also thank Mark Lloyd and Maria Brown. I want to get the right last name, because we wouldn't be doing what we're doing if it wasn't for our connection with them. So thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Nag. Anybody else on the left? Yes, ma'am. Good evening. Just if you would provide your name and address.
My name is Edie Robbins. I live in Williamsburg Farms, 5360 Old Franklin Court.
Okay. Very good.
I had 2 things, but the main one was one. I had just recently, a couple of weeks ago, put in my request for an absentee ballot, which I put in every year.
Okay.
Since I turned 62 or whatever it was when you could do it. And I have not received it. I've called the clerk's office. They told me that, they just got inundated with requests for absentee ballots, and they've got the boxes stacked around, and it would be coming out in 2 weeks. Now, when is the election?
Okay, any other questions? And I'm gonna have the clerk answer.
Yeah, I want to, well, it's not a question, but it's a statement. I want to make sure that when it comes time for the actual presidential election, that we don't run into this problem. I want to know what they're going to do to prepare for that, because you know that you're going to get a big increase of people requesting absentee ballots.
Okay. Well, we just happen to have our clerk sitting right here at the front.
I've talked to Kathy before.
With that,
So-
Ms. Lane,
Yes, we have sent out over 2,000 ballots the end of last week, the beginning of this week, so you should be getting your ballot within a few days.
Okay.
We're all caught up with all of the our permanent absentee mailing list, and so now we're taking any that are coming in by email, over the phone, and at the counter.
Okay.
any words?
And the
And for the
presidential election
presidential election.
is March the 10th, and so you can read.
The primary, you're saying?
The presidential primary is March the 10th, and you will be selecting on, when you submitted your application, either a Democratic ballot, a Republican ballot, or a.
Yeah, I'm not
no-party.
talking about that. I'm talking about when we have the actual presidential election.
That's
That's-
that's in the primary we have in August on the 4th and November the 3rd.
So any words of, that you can give her confidence that we won't be late on the
Yeah,
presidential?
I
We're
think
not
you're gonna
late
get a
on the
lot more
we
requests
are
for
not late
absentee
on the
ballots. That's what I'm
presidential
saying.
I can't wait.
primary.
Just a moment,
And-
please.
We are not late getting anything out on the presidential primary. We were late getting from the printer that the county hires, getting the ballots. And so rather than putting out precinct 1 and then you're in precinct 1 and you talk to a friend somewhere else, you got yours, well, I didn't get mine. So we held the majority of them and sent them out in 2 big batches to the,
You're talking about the last time.
this current one.
The one that just went out.
The ones that all just went out.
Yeah. I'm talking about the presidential
Well,
election.
we're gonna be following all the laws and everybody's gonna get everything in time, and we're encouraging people to vote by absentee ballot so that you can be a more informed voter and take the time to study a ballot at home.
Yes.
Rather than showing up and going, what, I didn't know this was
So
here.
maybe I can clear things up. I think the question might be, and typically we don't, get into a separate agenda item here, but I just want to make sure the public's aware on, because voting is such a critical thing. Is there a deadline that the absentee ballots will be out by, Ms. Lane?
No.
For the presidential?
No.
Okay.
The first step to an absentee ballot is you have to request a ballot application, just like if you went to the polls. You don't just get handed a ballot, you fill out an application.
But what,
Those are
aren't you
returned.
making that, didn't we just have a thing passed where everybody could fill out a thing now that said that they want to automatically get absentee ballots from now on and not have to fill out one of these requests for every election?
No. You are on our permanent absentee mailing list, and you will get an application when you're on that list about 60 days before an election. You always have to have an application filled out, and when we get it back, when we get the ballots, it gets sent out. And I know that confuses some people, but you couldn't walk into any polling location and walk up and get a ballot and say, I always vote.
But I was just told just last week that that had passed and that would be in effect for the next election, that people can say that they want to get a permanent, fill it out once, that they permanently want to have their ballots come as an absentee ballot for every election.
That's true. But before, as part of the state law, not my conditions, but state law, that was approved so that anybody 18 years on up for any reason could get an absentee ballot. But the first step to get a ballot, to ensure that 1 equals 1, is you fill out an application before every election, which will be mailed to you automatically. That has to come back to me And then when we get the ballots in, about 30 days before an election, the actual ballot is mailed out to you.
Well, I'd like to have verification on that because
How about we do this?
That was supposed to have gone into
Yep.
effect.
It
Let's-
is in effect, it's,
Okay.
you don't understand.
No, supposed to have gone into effect that people can ask for a permanent absentee ballot, and you do not have to do that every election, fill one out. It's already in the system that you permanently have asked that
Well,
you get an absentee
Ma'am,
ballot.
if we could do this, let's do this. I will give you my phone number,
Thank
and
you.
we will set up a time where Miss Lane and you and I can meet, and we'll go over what those rules are. We'll make sure, we're following, I'm sure Miss Lane is following the rules, but we'll make sure that it's very clear, and we'll also make sure that the public is aware of what those rules are. Does that work?
Yes,
Okay.
I would like that. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Mr. Atkins?
I'd recommend maybe we could, put some sort of a condensed version out on our website as well, because this could get pretty confusing, I can see
Yeah.
going forward, so.
We should put it on the residence.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Page 10.
Okay. Anybody else on the left-hand side of the room care to make comment? Anybody else on the left-hand side of the room?
Mr. Hurd?
Okay. I'm thinking we might have one of our shorter meetings tonight, but maybe not, we'll see.
Yes.
So with that, and if I can give this to the young lady that spoke, I'll,
Ms. Robbins?
here's my phone number, and we will, as Mr. Atkins said, we'll make sure that the public is aware of any questions on
We'll get
On the
that
absentee ballot.
Residence Grim Lake
and the
District.
answers. Okay. With that, at this time, I'm going to ask for approval of the minutes, and we can either do them individually or as a whole, or...
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes as a whole.
Support.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We've already approved the items on the consent agenda. With that, we will go to operational issues, and the first item is the board will consider a motion to approve Misty Moen, Senior Center Coordinator, as the authorized signatory for the contract with Genesee County Office of Senior Services.
So moved.
Mr. Chair.
There's been a motion, there's support.
Support.
This is, as we discussed on Tuesday, for the public, this is a agreement with the county for the senior center, and we've been moving some things around as we're transitioning the Parks and Rec to the township, and this is a piece of the business we need to take care of. So there's been a motion, it's been seconded, I don't see any further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item, we discussed on Tuesday at length as well, and we've grown as a township with our commercial taxable value to the level where a level 4 or MMAO certified assessor is required to sign our tax roll. So happens that we have Michael Dowler on our staff who's achieved the MMAO status, and this resolution is to approve Michael Dowler, MMAO, as the assessor of record for Grand Blanc Township. Township's required to have an MMAO certified assessor to certify the tax roll for the March Board of Review. Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Massey.
Support.
Support.
Support. Any discussion?
Resolution?
Yes. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Next item C, the board will hear an update from the Parks and Recreation Subcommittee. We covered this at length on Tuesday. I'm not sure there's anything else to report on that at this time, other than that I believe you're going to have an additional interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 2 additional interviews next week,
Are you doing the full review show?
and that should be the last round until we make some recommendation in front of the board, so.
Okay.
Can we?
Mr. Mansour?
Yep, so just to prepare, like we talked about on Tuesday, the board ought to be preparing for a special meeting between the interviews on Monday and the 4th Tuesday, as soon as we can get
Okay.
to it.
Absolutely.
And that'll be for the purpose of...
For the purpose
having
of interviewing and selecting, exactly right,
Right.
director.
Mr. Massey?
These interviews that are coming up, Mr. Chair, can the board member attend?
Coordinate it through Megan Gilman, our administrative assistant, just to make sure we don't have more than 3 board members there.
Okay.
And I think we're good with having somebody there. We just need to make sure if we're going to have 3 or more, if we're going to have more than 3, then we need to make it a public meeting. Miss Lane?
Could I have clarification from the subcommittee, the date of the special meeting, so it can be properly?
Well, we don't know that yet.
We don't know that
We're going to know that after we have the interview this
All right.
week.
We still have one phone interview to do.
Well, phone and a live interview, I believe, but Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Massey, if you want Trustee Massey, if you want my spot on the 2 interviews, you can have my spot.
Okay, thank you,
You're welcome,
Okay.
sir.
trustee.
Okay. Moving on to item D, the board will consider a motion to approve the road construction agreement for the Blanc Estates Special Assessment District with the Genesee County Road Commission and authorize the township supervisor to execute all related contracts and agreements.
So move.
Support.
Any discussion? We discussed this at length on Tuesday, and the neighborhood or the subdivision is ready to move forward, so with that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item E, the board will consider a motion for approval of the amended resolution to adopt the Genesee County Stormwater and Flood Control Design Standard requirements in its entirety. This is a standard that the county sets, and many of them are from the state, but our township, in coordination with the county, we want to make sure that our standards we're following the county standards, and that's what this motion will allow us to do.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mr. Atkins?
Second.
Supported by Mr. Massey. Any discussion? Okay.
Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
This is a motion.
A motion to approve an
An
amended resolution. Mr. Massey?
Myself
Yes,
Still
yes.
a motion.
and Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Ridiculous.
Okay.
I vote no.
Let's go to board reports, Mr. Mansour,
Mr.
or anything on future board
Mr.
agenda?
Chair,
Yes.
may I interrupt you for a moment,
Sure.
please? Can we put on, for the future agenda item, can we
Sure.
put on the access code to the town hall?
Oh, we can talk about that, what you want to do, but what, you want to talk about how, the policy for it, or
We want to talk about having access.
it's not working?
Some
or-
days we cannot come into the town hall.
Okay.
We've been locked out.
Okay. All right, yeah, we can talk about it.
You can get on the next agenda.
Okay. Anything else?
Then, so,
Mansour?
yep, from the Planning Commission Metro Alliance, first from the Metro Alliance meeting, last one was held on January the 15th. This meeting was pretty typical, although quite a bit of time was spent on the draft presentation of a pitch that they're putting together called Genesee, Our County, Our Future. And it was a pretty extensive review of some of the some of the priorities that are going on in the county in terms of roads and that kind of thing. So I'll have a copy of that draft, and then make sure that it's available maybe on our website or linked to their website where it's located. It was pretty extensive, and it's worth the time if people want to roll through that. Other than that, there was just some additional approvals of some transportation improvement program amendments. And then other than that, Planning Commission continues to meet every month. We had 2 projects go through the site plan review, and there was agreement at the Planning Commission to move those along to the township, although there were a couple of amendments that were asked for in terms of some of the compliance with things like dumpster cover, etc. But those will be coming through for the township to approve. Finally, the Master Plan Subcommittee met and continue to work on that. Again, there's well over 700 responses to our survey. Some people think that's a lot. Some people think that that's not very many considering the size of our community. But nonetheless, that's what we have. And we have a commitment from our Planning Commission folks that we've hired that we'll have a review of those survey results for this next Planning Commission meeting. So as soon as I get those, I'll be pleased to share those with the board as well. That's it, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mansour. I know the planning commission's been very active. Mr. Thomas?
On the future agenda items, Supervisor, I'd like to put on there a budgetary consideration for the Perry House
Okay. Wow.
next meeting.
To review it or to review the budget for it?
To review.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Atkins, anything on zoning board of appeals or parks?
Nope, nothing to report out.
Okay. Just make a note here. Okay. Fire commission, obviously, we don't have anything to report on other than,
Well,
go
Mr.
ahead, Mr.
Chair,
Massey. Yes.
I'd like to pass that on to Attorney Laddie if he has any updates for us.
I don't. We're still awaiting the results of the closing audit from Yo and Yo, and I know that the city is anxious to see that as well. Yo and Yo said that they would be getting that to us. Their estimated time was somewhere between mid and late February, and we're there.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll get some feedback from Yo and Yo any day.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Guzak, anything?
No, nothing at
Okay.
this time.
Ms. Lane?
Well, we have given out a lot of absentee ballots to people who have requested them, but we're open from 8 to 5 daily to take any more applications for absentee ballots. There are also samples of the ballots on the counter so that you can see what they look like. This is one time when you have to make a selection between 3 different ballots, whether you select the Republican ballot, the Democratic ballot, or the no party declaration. You will get the ballot that you requested, but I want you to know the township is not retaining in the qualified voter file any record once we send you that ballot and you return it. But that is retained in the qualified voter file by the state.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Lane. With regard to just a couple of bullet points, one is, I think, Mr. Limita, we had an update with regard to the zip code change, and just to clarify for the public, and I know it's been in the newspapers, that we asked for a change both in Holly Township, or at least the Grand Blanc locations that have a Holly mailing address, as well as those that have a Flint address. The request to change those addresses that have a Holly mailing address that are within the township, that was denied. What they are suggesting is that those addresses that, or locations or properties that are within Grand Blanc Township that have a Flint address, that their zip code stay the same, but that they become, the legal property is going to be listed as Grand Blanc. So whether or not it makes a difference on your car insurance remains to be seen, but if your legal address is Grand Blanc, I would tend to think that it probably will change it. We'll only see, but you go to the Secretary of State, eventually when your license expires, they will automatically change it to Grand Blanc. We are told that any subscriptions, anything that you're a member of, most of them subscribe to some type of address correction, and that will actually change it to Grand Blanc. If not, they will allow mail to be continued to be delivered, even if it's addressed to Flint, for the time being, probably for a period of time. So that surveys are out right now. They went out to over 900 locations, and we need to get back, if 50% of them come back, and out of that 50%, more than half say that they would like to change, then the change will take effect. We did have the board had a streets subcommittee meeting. Ms. Lane, Mr. Massey, and myself met, and we are taking a look at a number of things. We know that we have had some concerns from one specific subdivision with regard to thrush and robin. We're looking at that situation and how we can address that and other situations that may come before us. But we are doing some research with both the road commission, and so we will. One of the things that we want to get to is having a town hall meeting where we actually invite the public, but we have a little bit of homework yet to do. We're going to meet again in 2 weeks to take a look at the research that's being done. And then also, the fire chief, I don't see him here tonight, but I think we have some exciting things happening there with a new fire engine being prepared for delivery. And I see on social media some photos of it, getting some final touches made to it. And we'll keep it posted. I know a few board members have suggested maybe having some type of event. I don't know, what's it called, Mr. Mansour?
I think Chief called it a pushback.
Okay. So maybe, I guess when you get a new fire truck, you do instead of a ribbon cutting, you do a
Push it into the
pushback.
garage.
So we pushed it in the garage.
Yep.
So my only word of caution is Saginaw Street is pretty busy, so I'm not sure we want to stand in the middle of Saginaw Street to do it.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have a competent police department that can help us with that.
True. With that, I'm sorry, Mr. Massey?
Chair, I have a question. to
Sure.
ask you. Can we put on the agenda for the next meeting, I just thought of it as you were talking about the road, about our new finance investment?
See where we're at with our new investments?
Because it's new and we
Right.
don't know where we really are.
Okay.
You know,
Good
what the
point.
returns are they satisfactory, whatever?
Okay, yeah, we can give an update on
Okay.
where we're at on it. I
Yeah.
think we're still in transition.
We're still in transition, but
Yeah.
you can.
Yes.
Mrs. Nag, after the meeting, can I see you, please?
Mr. Laddie?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Mr. Mansour?
Make a
Motion.
motion to adjourn?
Support.
Amen.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Hey, we set a record.
What's
It's
that?
the first record we set. We broke one. We broke
Yeah.
it.